Hi, Brooke. Welcome to Breaking Beauty Podcast. What we do with our founder episodes, we go way back to before you started the brand. And I think what a lot of people might not realize, we're going to talk about this in today's episode, is that Pacifica actually got started in 1996. So you really were one of the pioneers in, it was probably called green beauty at the time. But tell us what you were up to before starting Pacifica.
Okay, I love this question. I feel like my whole life led to Pacifica. And so I grew up on a cattle ranch in Montana, and we raised our own cattle. We raised our own chickens and sheep and all sorts of animals. And my sister and I were 4-H kids, which meant some people don't know what that is. But
Head, heart, health, and hands, baby. I was one too.
Amazing.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yes.
So
right?
yeah.
That's what the 4-H's stand for.
Yeah. And so we raised sheep, and as a kid, I realized that, when you're in 4-H, you wind up going and touring the slaughterhouse. And so it was a moment where I put it all together, like, oh my gosh, we're eating our pets. And that was a really big moment for me because it led to my pursuit around veganism and thinking about animal rights. And that's a part of Pacifica and a really important part of Pacifica. And another thing is that when I was growing up, my mom was diagnosed with MS. And so she became really obsessed with the food that we ate and how we thought about our diets and how we thought about food. And so one of the things that she had my sister and I do was work at the local food co-op, which was a health food store at the time. And she was an early member there, and we would stock the shelves. You could kind of choose your job, and we had to work, I don't know, it was like 5 hours a week to get a discount. And so I always chose the HABA department, which is the health and beauty department, and I would stock vitamins and skincare, and then I would think, oh my gosh, I could make this so much prettier, and what would it be like to have my own beauty brand? And I started really thinking about having my own brand, and when I was only like 12. And so that was an important part of my childhood. And then when I was a teenager, I read the book Jitterbug Perfume, and it's by Tom Robbins. It's a super fun book. It's actually, I don't know if it's available on audio, but it would be really fun on audio.
No.
But it's about this guy who's a king, and when he got a gray hair, he was going to be killed because you couldn't age as a king. And so he escaped, and then he figured out how to live forever. And then he met this woman who was going to be burned because her husband died. And then he was like, come live forever with me. And so they went on these, crazy hijinks. And then the cool thing is that she wore this particular perfume. And when she was like, I'm done living forever, it's been like 400 years, I want to die, she figured out how to die. But the scent of her he would smell it when she'd walk into a room, or she was, if she was a spirit or whatever, he would smell her. And so it started talking about the idea that scent is transcendent, and it's this, it goes beyond time and space. And I got really excited about that, and I started really thinking about scent and how much I loved it. And then when I moved to Eugene, Oregon, I apprenticed with an aromatherapist, and that's where I got, it's also where I tasted avocados for the first time and learned about veganism, really, and that there were people called vegans, because that wasn't a thing when I was a Montana kid. And then, and that really led me to Pacifica. And I wound up meeting my boyfriend, the now husband, and he was like, we should turn this into a brand. We should turn your ideas into a brand. And he was really a pusher of being an entrepreneur.
So aromatherapy, that definitely captures an era. And so how did you well, actually, first of all, tell us about aromatherapy. Is there's a science to it?
Yeah, so aromatherapy is really the practice of using aromatic materials, essential oils, but also scented materials to improve your well-being. So I think it's really important to note that it's a complementary therapy. And so it's something that like a massage. Think of aromatherapy as a massage. It's going to complement what you're doing on a path, your journey, your wellness journey, and or your healing journey. It's just a complementary piece to that. And there's really great science around how aromatherapy helps cancer patients when they're going through chemo. Again, it's not curing cancer, but it's just helping relieve stress, relieve anxiety. It's really great for your mind. And so that's how I always think about aromatherapy. Is I approach it as it's a part of the puzzle, and it's a part of helping your mind and helping alleviate stress or anxiety or helping affect your mood. I actually, there's also some really good science around how people with depression or people who lose their sense of smell wind up being depressed because your sense of smell is so critical to your mental state and to memories and to all sorts of things. And I actually got COVID about a year and a half ago and lost my sense of smell. And so it was a real journey for me. And that also led to get my sense of smell back, because being a perfumer and using scent every day and how important it is to my life, that was like my biggest fear of getting COVID is like, I cannot lose my sense of smell. And it felt like my identity. And so when I lost it, I spent, I thought, well, it'll come back. And then fast forward like 4 months later, it hadn't come back. 6 months later, I couldn't smell as much as hardly anything still. And so I had to train my brain to start smelling again. And I actually worked with a friend of mine who's a perfumer who sent me a kit. And he explained how a lot of perfumers during COVID who lost their sense of smell would retrain their brains around smelling and use this particular kit that had different things that we knew, like coffee and mint and things that you're like, okay, brain, this is mint. And so I practiced that, but it still was about a year later that my sense of smell finally started coming back, and now it's back.
I wondered with aromatherapy, is it triggering I know we can't get too deep into the science, but is it triggering a memory and that's the power of aromatherapy? Or is it actually kind of like taking a acetaminophen when you have a headache where it's actually doing something to the chemicals? Do you know?
There is science that says both. So that a particular scent, let me give you an example, like lemongrass has there's a reaction that more people than not get when they smell lemongrass, like a feeling of joy or a feeling of, bliss. And so it's a commonality to us as humans that certain scents, and it's the molecular makeup, I imagine, of the scent helps us feel a certain way. But then there's also a whole practice around people with PTSD and using scent as an anchor, so that if you have had an experience that's incredibly negative, but you have a scent that you love, grandma's cookies or whatever, you can use that to recalibrate the way that you're experiencing something. And so you can use it. That's not aromatherapy by traditional perspectives, but that, to me, that's how I see it, aromatherapy.
And so I read that you were selling these essential oil fragrances at Grateful Dead concerts. How did you go from that to the aisles of Ulta?
So when I was apprenticing as an aromatherapist, I was far more interested in blending perfumes. And so the person I worked for would be in her room doing her modality, and she also did all sorts of other things with the essential oils. And I would be blending the recipe, and then I would be blending my perfume for the day. And so I would be probably a nightmare employee, because I'm like, I'm going to do my own thing. And so I would make my own perfumes. And then friends would say, oh my gosh, you smell amazing. What are you wearing? And so I'd started making perfumes for friends. And then I thought, you know what, I'm going to just try and sell these. And the Grateful Dead was coming. It was Eugene, Oregon in the early 90s. And so I blended a bunch of perfumes in little bottles, cute little bottles, and put a cute little label on them and sold them at the Grateful Dead concert. And that gave me this like feeling of that entrepreneurial rush. And so I then started selling them at the little what was it? What are I'm spacing on what it is when the little fairs on Saturday market,
like
Saturday
flea
market.
markets.
Yes, that's what they're
Yeah.
called. And then from there, it just grew into the first products that we launched at Pacifica were 7 perfumes. And back in 1996, 97, there weren't really boutique perfumes in the world. It was, you had the designer perfumes, or you had like the celebrity perfumes locked in cases at the drugstore, but there wasn't that kind of in between. And there were people shifting the industry like Joe Malone
Right.
and people that had their own stores, and the Body Shop was kind of playing with it. But so it was really early days, and so we didn't really have a market for the perfumes, and so we put them into candles, and that's what took off actually, were our candles, even though they were part of the perfumes. But then we brought perfumes into the natural products world, and that became a business. And so it wasn't until 2013 that we launched at Ulta. So we've been, it was a long haul
long
in natural
journey.
food stores.
Wow.
Until till it became more mainstream and more interesting to have a brand like Pacifica at Ulta.
Yeah.
Right.
Absolutely. Well, it's sort of, I feel like there was a whole period, I remember there was this uprising of like cool, chic brands that were coming out of the natural food stores, but they were really premium. They were priced premium. And so that part of the evolution was like, okay, people want this, but more at an affordable price. And I feel like that's when Pacifica kind of was right there and waiting.
It totally was. It's right. That's really when we took off. Was the economy was shifting to around 2012, and Pacifica was there where the customer finally was ready to meet us in that space. And so, and for me, growing up a kid in Montana and not, like Kmart was our big store, our big splurge, and I always wanted products to be accessible for our customers. It's been to me, it's part of our brand DNA and a really part of my values.
Right.
Yeah.
So when were you inspired to get into skincare? Because that came a little bit after the perfumes. So tell me about that.
Yeah. So we launched skincare in about 2008, and we had body care and skincare, and it was a response to the scents, bringing body care into, certain. We had body butters, and we put our fragrances, our scents into body butters, and that was the first part of skincare. And then I went to school to be an esthetician because I was so excited about skincare, and so I wanted to have a skincare line. And so I learned a ton about skincare, and I actually found an incredible natural chemist to work with around creating the skincare line. And so we launched a skincare line early on, which has changed and morphed over the years, but it was more around my vision around natural ingredients and flowers and aromatherapy and how we could bring these into a skincare product that felt tactile and experiential and smelled amazing and was really efficacious, but also affordable. And so we launched that at Whole Foods. That was the first place we launched skincare.
So did you complete that? Like, are you a certified esthetician?
So I didn't go to get my license.
You dropped out.
Beauty school dropout.
I went through the whole beauty school in Portland, and but then I was like, you know what, I want to continue my skincare brand. I don't want to be an esthetician. However, I did partner with one of the women who was one of my besties in school, and she and I wrote a back bar manual together, and we actually had back bar products back then.
Really?
So we actually had skincare in spas. We were in the Four Seasons in Costa Rica.
Holy
and,
jeez.
Yeah, and places like
Amazing.
that. So we've had quite a long skincare
she knows
journey.
what's up.
Yeah.
So the Glow Baby Vitamin C Serum, that's a more recent launch, isn't it? Like
It's
6 years ago?
So
or?
it's a reincarnation
Oh, okay.
of a vitamin C serum that we launched with early on. That was one of our first launches.
Okay.
But Glow Baby morphed into a really beautiful glass package with a new name.
Yeah.
And we launched that around 2000, probably, I have to look back, but 2017-ish.
Yeah, because I remember when that launched, I covered something in there, in that range. And is that the best seller now?
Yes, our Glow Baby Serum is our best-selling product.
That's
And
amazing.
It's really effective. People who use it freak out and love it. It smells good. We're really proud of that whole collection. So we then took it into a face wash, and we have some glycolic pads that go along with it. So it's a full line now.
I'm curious because it's only $18, and there are a lot of vitamin C's out there, and you have a lot of SKUs. So what is it about that particular vitamin C product that you think, and it's also hard to stabilize, and it's a bit fickle. So what's the magic in the bottle?
The magic in that bottle is we are using a stabilized form of vitamin C, but we're also using cockadoo plum. So cockadoo plum is a natural extract that has, I think, like 1,000 times more vitamin C than like an orange or something like that. But it's really also a carrier of vitamin C, and so it just has that extra slug of ingredients that work really well. And at the end of the day, I think for our consumer, and for me, it's really important that our products are incredibly efficacious for the right price point. And so we're not dumbing down the ingredients. We're making sure that we're using them at levels that really affect your skin, work really well. And we are really mindful constantly of our price point. It's a really important part of what we do. And it's something that we've set out, we say it every day to the whole team, like we're really thoughtful around not overpricing our products and making sure that we're creating a really valuable offering for our consumer. I think that's part of our compassion position as a brand.
Yeah,
really important.
And did you do clinicals on the vitamin C as well?
We have, we run clinicals on vitamin C. Where we went really deep in our clinicals is our new line called Future Youth.
Okay.
And that's where we have, we did 10-day and 4-week clinicals and before and afters to really show the effect of that particular ingredient that we're using in that collection. And that's called our Flora Peptide 11. So it has 11 ingredients, and it's really efficacious, and it's shown clinically to really help, like our eye serum, for instance, really affects crow's feet, really helps affect the appearance of your skin, both short-term and long-term. And I wanted to create a line that was about longevity and was about keeping your skin looking amazing, because we're all figuring out how to live longer, and we're all figuring out how we want to take better care of our bodies. And I think taking care of your skin is a really big part of that, because I want to look amazing when I'm 104.
I think it's great, and perfect timing, really, that you're kind of coming 360 with this brand, with the relaunch of aromatherapy fragrances. So you had some already, but you're launching 3 new ones, and it's new packaging, and it all has to do with aromatherapy. Is that right?
So we call it aromapower, and for me, that's a mashup of aromatherapy meets classical perfuming, because I think that there's limits, obviously, in aromatherapy. I love perfumes. I am not like a stickler around, must be, this particular brand, or must come from Whole Foods. Like I love smelling all perfumes in the world. I can't get enough of it. And so I really wanted to take classical perfuming, but bring in those ideas around aromatherapy, where this perfume will inspire joy. This perfume will be more grounding. And so that's the approach we took. So they're really perfumes. So every single...
You have one in front of you. I'm gonna have a look.
Smell
Montana Sky. Of course.
Yes, it's a nod to my home.
I'm gonna do a little spritz.
She's doing it, everyone.
Live
spritzing. Live spritzing.
Ooh, that's pretty.
So is it an eau de parfum, or what is it? It's
it
is.
Yeah. So we use a really good slug in our perfumes of scent, of the scent material, because again, I want it to. One, we don't use phthalates.
Okay.
So we have that does cause elastability issues. So if anyone complains about our perfumes, they don't last for 24 hours or they don't last long enough, but that's because, we're not using phthalates. And I think that's an ingredient we just won't use. We've never used it in our perfumes. When I first started learning about classical perfuming, they're like, we'll bring this ingredient into, you have to make sure if you're using essential oils, we boost it with phthalates. And I'm like, what's a phthalate?
Right.
And so I really learned a lot, and went down the rabbit hole on that. So I really feel like we're probably one of the first brands that started positioning ourselves as phthalate free.
Right.
And so that's one of the things that's key around Pacifica and this particular launch as well.
I noticed one of the ingredients that you sort of call out is natural grain alcohol. So what's the significance there?
Yeah, so when you can actually use like a petrol-based chemical alcohol, or you can use like a beet or corn or sugar grain based alcohol. And so we're using the natural grain alcohol. versus
Okay.
the petrochemical. And
I
for me,
see.
I'll avoid petrochemicals whenever we can in anything.
Yeah.
How long did it take you to kind of come up with this assortment? So how many are there?
There's 7
There's 7 now?
scents,
Mhm.
and what we did, so we've always had perfumes, as you know,
Yeah.
and so what we did was we took our best-selling perfumes
Yeah.
and combined them into one cohesive collection that looked
Okay.
fresh and new, and we doubled the juice. That's the other thing our consumers are like, well, I use up my perfume so fast.
Okay.
And so we doubled the juice, so they're even better value than they were before, and they last longer. And I also, the glass,
Mhm.
we use a screw cap, so you
Oh.
can take the cap off. Most perfumes, you'll notice, are crimped,
Right.
but we custom mold the glass so that you can use that screw cap, so you can take it off, you can reuse it if you want, but you can also recycle it, which is really meaningful to me. And then also I wanted the glass to feel kind of like 60s milk glass.
Yeah.
Yeah,
And
it's cute.
yeah, and have this little kind of milk glass vibe. My grandmother always collected milk glass, and I'm obsessed with milk glass, and so I was really
Beautiful.
pushing for that. You can really see it in the Indian coconut nectar that's white. It has more,
Yeah.
it's all really super
What's your
milky.
personal favorite? Is there like a personal story?
Montana Sky is
Yes.
my personal
Still,
favorite.
yeah.
And it's, it's just a nod to that, like the smell of the sky, that ozonic note that you get, and then bringing that down to something that's really grounding. So we're using like vetiver and smoky notes in there, and sage, and things that smell like just that kind of wild country. And so I think it's really sexy. I also think I love the idea of having unisex scents,
Right.
and most of our scents in my mind are unisex and really developed for anyone to wear. 20% of our consumers are men, and so it's really important
Yeah.
that we serve
Right.
all
That's
of our
cool.
customers.
Is this the #1 bestseller now? Like for the fragrances?
Well, no, I thought it would be.
Okay.
Like my prediction was this,
Right.
which I'm often wrong. My favorites aren't always our best
Yes.
sellers, but so far it's passion
Oh,
fruit,
interesting.
which is also really unisex, and it's
Okay.
has really some beautiful deep notes, but it also has that a little bit of, I don't want to say powderiness to it, but there's a little bit of like when you smell a dry fruit and you have this like dryness in the scent. It's a really hard
It's
scent
not
to
as juicy.
describe.
Is this what
yeah,
you're saying?
It's not.
Yes.
It's not like just fully juicy,
Got it.
sweet,
Yeah,
syrupy.
obvious.
Yeah, it
Yeah.
has that little bit of a dry, like dry fruit note to it. That's really beautiful.
As a trained aromatherapist, can you give us like a little 101, aside from the lavender to go to sleep, like what would be 3 notes to look for to feel a certain way?
Okay, well, we are using, I'll speak to the ones that we're using. We
Yeah.
use jasmine. So jasmine is a scent that is really calming. And I love putting jasmine oil on my wrists, and I always use it with anything I'm wearing. I carry this little tiny vial of jasmine grandiflorium. It's, like $35 for this little vial that I buy. But it just smells incredible, and it's really relaxing and calming. And so sometimes I smell it, and if I'm feeling anxiety or stress, and so jasmine is one that I always turn to and recommend for people.
Okay.
Sandalwood is another, and that's incredibly grounding. And so it's a scent that you can, if you're feeling just kind of jittery and like, oh my gosh, I can't focus, I can't get grounded. Sandalwood is a really grounding scent. And then one that we're not using in our blends today, but I'll bring it up, is lemongrass, and it's one of my personal favorites. But it also is a scent that does help kind of bring in a sense of focus. Like if you have to study and you have to, it's to me that's different than grounding, in that if it helps you like really get zoomed in on something. And
Okay.
so lemongrass is one that I recommend. Like if you
It
have
smells so good.
Oh,
Lemongrass.
I
I'm
love
obsessed.
lemongrass.
Yeah.
I know it's polarizing in that
Yes.
some people think it smells like cleaning products,
Yeah.
and some people love it and smell the sweetness and the beautiful notes that are in there. And so maybe like cilantro, it's one of
Yeah.
those notes that different brains interpret it differently.
Okay.
I love that.
Yeah.
And there are a lot of people out there listening who maybe love perfume, but they feel like it doesn't love them back. Like it might irritate or whatnot. So I imagine you did a lot of like testing around sensitivity and stuff. So is there anything you learned like that for someone who is scent sensitive, what they might enjoy, what they might not, or what might suit them better?
Yeah, I think if you're looking for perfumes and
Mhm.
you're sensitive to scent and it's a hard area for you, but you love it,
Yeah.
look for brands that are phthalate free. I think
Okay.
that's a great place to start because those brands are generally really paying attention to.
So phthalates they can be like irritating to
They can be irritating.
all your
Yes.
senses. Okay.
Yes. And
Yeah.
so, but beyond just the phthalate,
Mhm.
a brand that's going to make that claim, and this is not not everybody, but this is just a generalization. That brand hopefully is looking at all the chemicals that they're using in their fragrances and really giving it a second thought and thinking about what they're using. I also think, brands that are Credo clean
Mhm.
are good brands for people who are sensitive to scent, and, or brands that are on the Ulta Conscious Beauty list would be brands that I would trust. If you're thinking about fragrances that may or may not irritate you, but everybody does have different sensitivities, so it's really important to be able to test it, use it, and just a small amount to see how you experience it and how it works for you.
Right. Okay. Is there any? So phthalates is the big one. Okay.
Okay. So I heard you on another podcast, and you mentioned that you're moving away from the phrasing clean beauty toward compassion standards. So I wondered what the reasoning is for that and why you're pulling back from the clean beauty, moniker that's been really like dominant in the past 5 years.
Yeah. Well, a couple things. I think the clean beauty movement is awesome. So I'm not anti-clean beauty, and I love the movement. I love clean beauty. What I want to do is really be clear around defining what Pacifica stands for and what our standards are so that the consumer really understands. Originally we were called natural beauty, and then that was like everybody's like, well, you're not 100% natural, so how are you natural? So then clean, like a little history of clean beauty would be, clean was a term that was used in the back labs. Our chemists used it, and it was a term that we would use for ingredients that weren't natural but that didn't appear on anybody's no list or blacklist. So they weren't on Whole Foods list, they weren't on a list that was popping up from a retailer. And so those were called clean ingredients. And then that word kind of migrated into the consumer facing space. And, we just fell into it because it's not something we were like, we're a clean beauty brand.
Right.
It just defined us and several other brands. And really that we're brands that were editing the palette of ingredients that we were choosing to use based on, the fact that there was potential, issues with those ingredients. It doesn't mean we were rejecting science either.
Yeah.
When people bring up clean versus science, I'm like, it's not. Those aren't two things that you kind of come into, against
They're
one
not
another.
mutually exclusive.
They're not mutual.
Yes.
Thank you. Yes, they're not mutually exclusive. They're, we're forced to use. If you limit your palette, you have to be really thoughtful around the chemistry that you're using. And so, but for me, our brand goes far beyond the ingredients. So it's really about how we think about the planet, how we think about our packaging, and that clean beauty doesn't always address that. And then I think how we think about how we're talking to our consumer, our stance on social justice, how we're making sure that we're using our brand to do good, how we think about animals. Clean beauty isn't always 100% vegan and, generally cruelty-free for sure at this point. But, for us, we're just bigger than that in the way that we think about our values. And so we call those our compassion standards because it encompasses more of our value position. And it's not that we're just a clean brand, even though I think, like I said, clean is great. And I love clean brands.
Yeah.
And there's amazing ones out there.
So we're talking about clean beauty and transparency, which is so big in 2024. And I was reading on a Reddit thread. People are curious about the biotin and glycerin in some Pacifica formulas, being that you're a vegan brand. So how would you respond to that?
Well, there are incredible non-animal based products that are also animal based. So glycerin could be, come from animals, or it could come from vegetables. Ours is a vegetable glycerin that we always use. Biotin could be an animal base. It's also in avocados and nuts and chickpeas, but ours is synthetic, so we use a synthetic form. And even when you think about ingredients, what's really exciting today is that there's all these fermented lab-grown ingredients coming out where they're able to create, kind of biomimetic ingredients like vegan collagen and things like that, which are better for the planet, use less water, don't harm animals. And so we're embracing that technology as well. There's a lot of really interesting things happening, but we're really true to our word when we say we're 100% vegan.
Yeah.
We are.
Okay.
I love Reddit, though. I do get down the rabbit hole on some Reddit threads.
Yeah,
Nothing more
that's
fun,
where you get the real
please.
talk. And if
Totally.
you can answer to it, then you're golden. Like it's people who try to dodge it. I'm like, why? Not answering the tougher questions. But I love it. So we're gonna have to find this. We're gonna have to take this clip and drop it into the Reddits because now they're gonna know. So what's the number one example of something that Pacifica has done that you believe has had the greatest positive impact on people and the planet?
Yeah, so there's lots of things for us, but the one thing that I'm really excited about right now, as a brand, we believe in taking accountability. Being a brand isn't an act of sustainability at the end of the day. It's we're using resources, et cetera. So I feel like it has been important. We've migrated a lot of our products from plastic to glass or aluminum, really thinking about our impact in packaging. But as we use plastic, we have chosen to partner with a group called Plastic Collective. And Pacifica and Plastic Collective are the two, we're funding a group called the Asase Foundation. And what the Asase Foundation does is it's a women-led, community-based plastic waste collection and recycling project that was established in 2019. And it's a project that starts small social recycling enterprises, so they're social enterprises, to help support families and women in Ghana. And what they do is they collect plastic, they recycle it on site. Plastic Collective was founded by a woman who became just really obsessed with, how do I create on-site recycling situations so that we can collect plastic in these areas that have this huge problem. And so it's a really exciting program, and it's been kicked off just in, I think this year. And we are looking also, we totally believe in radical collaboration. So my vision is that we get a bunch of other beauty brands to sign on and partner with us, because this isn't just, I want to pat Pacifica on the back. This is, how do I get my peers to join in with me and really support these organizations, specifically work with Plastic Collective to have an impact. And so really take accountability for the plastic that we're putting into the world. Even though we use PCR, so post-consumer recycled plastic, it's still there.
I've also heard you say that you've gotten feedback like, your beauty brand, why do you talk about politics? Because there is a certain activism that you guys do. So when you've spoken about reproductive rights, trans rights, and even we've gotten that feedback in the past about, like, whenever it's pretty rare, but whenever we've sort of stood up for anything going on in the world. So being that politics is such a hot button issue this year, do you think consumers have like a legitimate case for wanting their beauty to be about beauty? Maybe it's like a bit of a reprieve because it can be very stressful in this world right now. Or what's your stance on that now?
Yeah, so a couple things. We don't cram it down people's throats, and we also don't take a strong position on, politics.
Right.
Yeah.
That being said, I do take a really strong position on human rights and inclusivity and standing up for people. And so I think that in beauty is about freedom of expression. It's about inclusivity. It's about living your best life. It's about being your best self. And when I see people who are our consumers being attacked for that, and or people are, not if it's reproductive rights, if it's issues that affect our consumer in a really big way, I'm going to stand up for that. I feel like I've been given the luxury by our consumer, and having a brand and having the position that we have, that it's a responsibility for us to stand up for people and for us to use our platform for good and making a difference and making a change.
So, our final question for you, Brooke, is what is the dream product that's still on your bucket list to develop, create, and why? And this is really interesting because we didn't know before. Well, I didn't know that you had a background as going to aesthetic school. And
Well, first it would be a time machine, but that's not a beauty product. But maybe you could create a scent that would be like a time machine. Like I think thinking about something that has these incredible magical powers would be something that I would want to create. I know that's not very realistic, but I think that scent is something that kind of gets you there.
yeah.
But that would be my dream product, is something that you could spray and be like, oh,
Yeah.
I just went back in time. Maybe
Yeah.
you could actually get in a time machine.
Yeah.
Maybe I could invent that.
Right.
Back to the Future.
But yeah.
And I'm curious, outside of Pacifica, just how big of a perfume
Yes.
aficionado you are. Do you have a vanity with like all different? Do you collect them? Like, what does that look like?
I have literal buckets.
Really?
Yeah, like buckets. My office, if you were in my office, you would be really disturbed right now because I've been in the perfuming mode.
Yes.
I've been in the mode of like really pulling things together, and I guess you would call me a maximalist. I am a
Okay.
little bit of a hoarder.
Okay.
I like to have a lot of stuff, like scents that I can reference and think about. And so, none of us live in a vacuum, and I think there's
Yeah.
just incredible
Yeah.
scents out there, and so I like to get my hands
Yeah.
on everything. My mom wore opium,
Oh,
and
really?
these are scents that I have gone back and revisited
Yes.
because I'm like, oh, that's
Yeah.
so familiar. My grandma wore joy,
Oh, yeah.
and she was, she wore it until the day she died in her late 90s. She was just so, that was her,
Yeah.
that defined part of who she was.
Right. Yeah, that's amazing. I feel like once you're into perfume, it's like it is a bit of a lifelong pursuit. So that's
Well, thank you very much for your time. This has been a lot of fun.
Oh, my pleasure. So
Yeah.
fun. It went so fast.
I know.
Some fun
Thank
chatting
you.
with
Thank you
guys.
so much. And we will link to everything that you talked about on our website. So you guys can check it out there. Thank you so much,
Amazing.
Brooke.
Thank you.
All right. Thank you.